He was the king of the city, and she was the woman he'd thrown away. At the most exclusive party of the year, Gideon Holt held his new lover close, laughing about the pathetic ex-wife he'd left with nothing. He told his audience how he'd upgraded, how his life only truly began after he shed her dead weight. The crowd laughed with him, but across the glittering ballroom, the dead weight had just arrived. And she wasn't just here to serve drinks, she was here to end him, and she'd brought her father to watch. The Apex Gala, held on the 80th floor observation deck of the Viridian Tower, was not just a party, it was a coronation. And tonight, the man being crowned was Gideon Holt. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, rare orchids, and the unmistakable metallic tang of ambition. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a sprawling, glittering Los Angeles, a kingdom of lights laid at their feet. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved like ghosts, balancing trays of champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres that looked more like modern art than food. In the center of the most animated, sycophantic crowd was Gideon. At 36, he was a predator in a bespoke tuxedo. His dark hair was slicked back, and his smile, which had once been charming, had sharpened into a weapon of pure arrogance. His company, Holt Innovations, had just secured a 9-figure contract with the night's host, Blevins Tech, solidifying his status as Silicon Beach's new wunderkind. Hanging off his arm was Tinsley Rourke. Tinsley was not so much a person as a collection of expensive surfaces. Her dress was a sliver of crimson silk that seemed to defy gravity. Her lips were surgically enhanced to hold a permanent pout, and around her neck glittered a ruby necklace so large it looked heavy. "I'm just saying," Gideon brayed, his voice cutting through the polite murmur of the party, "that you have to be willing to cut bait. You can't reach the summit if you're carrying dead weight." A few of his new friends, venture capitalists and rival CEOs, nodded sagely, sipping their drinks. "You're talking about your old partner, right?" one of them, a man named Brody, asked. Gideon laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Partner? God, no, not partner. Wife. And dead weight is putting it kindly." Tinsley giggled, a sound like tiny, sharp bells. "Oh, Giddy, don't be mean. She was... What was that word you used? Quaint. Like a little garden gnome." "Exactly." Gideon snapped his fingers, delighted. "Quaint, that's it. She was quaint. She thought fiscal responsibility meant clipping coupons. She wanted me to keep the company small. Manageable. Can you imagine?" He gestured around the opulent room at the city below. "Can you imagine this manageable?" The group chuckled. Gideon leaned in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial shout. "I'll tell you a story. True story. The week before I landed the first round seed funding, the funding I busted my ass for, she had a panic attack, because I'd maxed out our last credit card to buy the servers we needed. She was crying, in our crappy little kitchen, saying I was gambling with her mother's inheritance. It was, 20 grand? A rounding error." "No," Tinsley gasped, placing a hand on her chest, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Yes." I looked at her. "Right then," Gideon said, his eyes hard. "And I knew she didn't have the vision. She was an anchor. So I cut the line. And look." He spun Tinsley in a little circle, her red dress flaring. "Look at the upgrade. Tinsley gets it. She inspires me. She's not afraid of success." "I'm not afraid of anything, darling," Tinsley cooed, kissing his jaw. "Except maybe bad lighting. Or," she added, her voice dripping with mock pity, "ending up like... What was her name? The garden gnome?" "Iris," Gideon said, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. Her name was Iris, And trust me, you'll never end up like her. I made sure of that. The woman probably works in a diner now. I honestly have no idea where she is, and I couldn't care less." He raised his glass. "To upgrades, to cutting anchors, and to Holt Innovations." "To Holt!" the group echoed, raising their glasses. Across the ballroom, hidden in the shadows near a service entrance she'd just been slipped through, a woman in a simple, elegant sapphire dress froze. Her hand, holding a single glass of water, trembled. She had heard every single word. The crappy little kitchen Gideon had mocked was the only home Iris Shaw had ever felt was truly hers. It was a third-floor walk-up in palms, with peeling linoleum and a perpetually dripping faucet. But it had a window over the sink that caught the morning light, and she had filled it with herbs. This was 5 years ago. Gideon Holt was not a king then. He was a brilliant, frantic, and desperate coder with a mountain of ideas and a valley of debt. And Iris was everything. She wasn't just his wife. She was his co-founder, his bookkeeper, his project manager, and his entire support system. The 20 grand he'd dismissed as a rounding error was $40,000, and it wasn't a small inheritance. It was every cent her mother, a quiet, hard-working librarian, had managed to save in her entire life. It was the money Iris had earmarked for a down payment on a small house, a home she could finally call her own after a childhood spent bouncing between relatives. Gideon had come to her, his eyes wild with a fire she'd mistaken for passion. "Iris, baby, this is it. This is the code that changes everything. But I need servers. I need real processing power. The VCs won't take me seriously with this laptop setup." "Gideon," she'd said, her hands twisting in her apron, "we can't. The credit cards they're gone. We're over the limit on all 3. "Who needs credit?" he'd said, grabbing her hands. His were sweating. "The house fund. That money from your mum. It's just sitting there. Iris, it's an investment. In us. In our future. Give me 6 months. Just 6 months, and I'll triple it. I'll buy you a house on the beach. I promise." She had looked at his face, so full of desperate hope, and she had caved. She transferred the money. The company, Holt Innovations, was legally formed a week later. Gideon, in a move she found efficient at the time, had her sign a ream of papers. "Just formalities, baby. You're the co-founder, but I'll be the CEO. You'll be, I don't know, chief operating officer. It's all just paper. We're in this together." Together meant Iris worked her 9-to-5 data entry job, came home, and then worked from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. managing Gideon's books, debugging his code, and writing the business proposals he was too big picture to focus on. She cooked every meal, paying for groceries in cash so it wouldn't show up on their bank statements. She was the one who stalled the landlord, who negotiated with the power company, who sold her own mother's car to make their first payroll for the 2 unpaid interns they'd hired. Gideon was the vision. Iris was the anchor, but not in the way he meant. She was the one holding the ship steady in the storm he created, the one keeping them from being dashed against the rocks. The change was slow, then sudden. The first-round seed funding came through, $1 million. It wasn't Gideon's frantic pitching that secured it. It was the meticulous 80-page business plan Iris had written, filled with market projections she'd stayed up a week straight to research. The night the money hit the bank, Gideon didn't take her to their favorite taco truck to celebrate. He took his 2 new VC buddies to a steakhouse that cost $500 a person. Iris, he'd said, should stay home and rest. He moved them out of the kitchen in Palms and into a glass-walled condo in Santa Monica. He traded his old hoodie for $2,000 Tom Ford suits. He started calling her Iris instead of baby. He stopped saying our company and started saying my company. The panic attack Gideon had described was the night she'd discovered the formalities she'd signed. He hadn't made her COO. He hadn't even made her an employee. He had registered her as a non-voting minority partner with a 5% stake, contingent on her continued spousal support. And the inheritance she'd given him? He'd filed it as a personal loan to himself, which he had paid back to himself with company funds, and then declared it forgiven. She hadn't had a panic attack. She had confronted him. You stole from me," she'd whispered, the papers shaking in her hand. "You erased me, Gideon." He hadn't even looked up from his laptop. "I built this, Iris. You typed. You made copies. Don't be dramatic. I'm the talent. I'm the brain. You were just... here." The divorce was the final humiliation. His lawyers, a team of smiling sharks, painted her as a gold-digging, unsupportive housewife. The prenup he'd slipped into the formality papers was ironclad. It stipulated that in the event of a dissolution, her 5% stake was nullified, as she had failed to provide a supportive home environment, a clause his lawyers argued was proven by her financial hysterics. She walked away with $10,000, a generous parting gift from Gideon, and her mother's maiden name, Iris Shaw. She had stood outside the courthouse, clutching a small box with her few personal belongings, and made a vow. He had taken her money, her work, and her name. He would not take her future. She would rebuild, and if she ever got the chance, she would take back what was hers, not the money, but herself, her dignity. She hadn't known her chance would come on the 80th floor of the Viridian Tower, 5 years later, with the taste of Gideon's casual cruelty still bitter on her tongue. Iris Shaw did not look like a garden gnome. She had spent the last 5 years in a crucible. The first year after Gideon, she had, in fact, worked in a diner. She'd served lattes and avocado toast at a cafe in West Hollywood, saving every single tip. She lived in a tiny studio apartment with no view and a noisy refrigerator. But Iris was brilliant. She hadn't just been debugging Gideon's code. She was a better, more meticulous, more ethical coder than he had ever been. She had a mind for systems, for seeing the flaws before they became catastrophes. She took her tips and enrolled in night courses. She got certifications. She freelanced, building a small, powerful portfolio under her new name. She was quiet, she was relentless, and she was smart. 2 years ago, she'd been hired as a junior analyst at a boutique sustainable tech firm, Pendleton Global Solutions. It was a small, unassuming company that did profoundly important work, specializing in green logistics and ethical AI. She thrived. She was promoted, then promoted again. She was now a senior project manager, and her latest project, a new carbon-neutral logistics algorithm, was the reason she was at the Apex Gala. Her company had partnered with Blevins Tech on a small subsidiary project. Her boss, a kind man named Mr. Wright, had fallen ill with the flu. He had insisted Iris go in his place. "You need to be there, Iris," he'd said, via a wheezing phone call. "Blevins is a shark, but his team respects data. Your algorithm is the data. You are the project. Go. Mingle. Just try not to let the atmosphere choke you." So here she was. She had bought her dress, a deep, sapphire blue velvet gown by a designer she admired, from a high-end consignment shop. It was worth every penny. It was elegant, powerful, and most importantly, it was hers. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, intricate chignon, and her only jewelry was a pair of simple pearl earrings, her mother's. She looked like she belonged, which is why it was so jarring when Gideon Holt, the man whose entire career she had funded, had just announced to the world that she was probably serving drinks in a diner. She stood in the shadow of a colossal ice sculpture, her knuckles white on her glass of water, her heart hammering a painful rhythm against her ribs. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, coiling sickness in her stomach. She could feel the stares of the people near the service entrance. They thought she was a party crasher. Just breathe, Iris. You are not that woman anymore. You are not his anchor. You are not his victim. She forced her shoulders back, lifting her chin. She was here to do a job. She was here to represent her company and her work. She was here to find Mr. Blevins, shake his hand, and discuss the Phase 2 implementation of her algorithm. Gideon Holt was a ghost, a bad memory. She took a steadying breath and stepped out from the shadows, her modest heels making almost no sound on the polished marble floor. She scanned the crowd, looking for the telltale white hair of Lawrence Blevins. Instead, her eyes locked with his. Gideon. He was 20 feet away, still holding court, Tinsley still plastered to his side. He saw her. His eyes widened just for a fraction of a second. The laughter died on his lips. He saw her, not as the quaint gnome he'd been describing, but as the woman standing before him, poised, beautiful, and radiating a calm intensity that, for a moment, made him forget his punchline. But a bully's ego is a fragile, violent thing. Shock quickly curdled into amusement, and then into a familiar, cold contempt. He hated that she didn't look broken. He hated that she was here, in his palace, on his night. He wanted to snuff out that light. He wanted to remind her, and everyone else, exactly who she was. He smiled, a slow, reptilian smile. He put his champagne flute down on a passing tray. He took Tinsley's hand. "Gideon, darling, what is it?" Tinsley asked, confused by his sudden silence. "A ghost, my love," Gideon murmured, his eyes never leaving Iris. "A ghost from the past. Let's go say hello. We should be welcoming." He began to walk toward her, parting the crowd like a shark moving through water. Tinsley, sensing blood, trotted gleefully at his side. Iris's heart didn't pound. It went cold. It went still. She did not run. She did not look away. She simply stood her ground, her mother's pearls a cool, steady weight on her ears. The king was coming to his anchor, and she was done holding his ship. She was ready to let him sink. The space between them crackled with 5 years of unspoken history, of bitterness, of theft, and of pain. The ambient noise of the party seemed to fade into a dull roar, the orchestra's strings sounding distant and thin. Gideon stopped a few feet from her. He looked her up and down, a slow, insulting appraisal. He noted the dress, the hair, the pearls. He registered expensive, but his arrogance immediately recontextualized it as desperate. Well, his voice was smooth, buttery, and laced with poison. "Iris, I have to say, I'm impressed. I didn't realize they let the catering staff mingle." A few people in their immediate orbit turned, sensing the drama. Tinsley, ever the faithful echo, let out a performative gasp. "Oh, Giddy, don't be cruel. She's not catering." She leaned in, her voice a stage whisper that carried 6 feet. "Are you, sweetie? Or did you just follow the sound of money?" Iris looked at the woman who had replaced her, a woman wearing a rock on her neck that Gideon had probably bought with the profits from Iris's work. She felt nothing. Not jealousy. Just a clinical, cold pity. "Hello, Gideon," Iris said, her voice clear and steady. It didn't waver. This, more than anything, seemed to infuriate him. "Hello, Gideon," he mimicked, turning to Tinsley. "That's all she has? After all this time, I'd have expected, I don't know, tears, begging. He turned back to Iris, his smile widening. What are you doing here, Iris? Seriously, are you lost? Did you get separated from your tour group? I'm here for work, Gideon, Iris stated simply. This was too much for Tinsley. The idea that this, nothing, could have work in a place like this was an insult. Work? Tinsley scoffed, adjusting the gaudy ruby on her collarbone. What, did you find a rich old man to be your +1? She looked around. Where is he? Hiding in the men's room? Or did you just sneak in? Gideon stepped closer, invading her personal space. He was a good 6 inches taller, and he used it, looming over her. Listen, Iris. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is my party. This is my night. You are not going to ruin it. You've taken enough from me. The audacity of the statement hit Iris like a physical blow. You've taken enough from me. She, who had been erased. She, who had funded his entire existence. A slow, dangerous anger, an anger she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 5 years, began to uncoil in her stomach. I took... From you? She asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Yes, you, Gideon hissed, dropping the charming facade. His face was ugly now. My time, my energy, my youth. I dragged you along for years, trying to make you see the world the way I do, and you fought me every step of the way. You were a boat anchor, Iris, and now you show up here, in that dress, trying to... What? Make me jealous? He laughed, a truly ugly sound. Look at Tinsley. Look at her. This is a woman who supports me. This is a woman who isn't afraid of success. She's not quaint. Tinsley preened. It's true. I'm his muse. She held up her hand, waggling her fingers. The engagement ring on it was a monstrosity, a cluster of diamonds so large it looked like a small galaxy. And this is what a muse gets. She looked at Iris's bare hands. What did you get, Iris? A $10,000 check and a bus ticket out of his life? That's what Gideon told me. He said it was the best money he ever spent. The circle around them had widened. Everyone was watching. Gideon Holt, the man of the hour, was verbally eviscerating some poor, unknown woman. It was spectacular. Iris felt the stares like pinpricks, the humiliation, the shame. It was all there, bubbling up, threatening to drown her. This is what he wanted. He wanted her to cry. He wanted her to scream. He wanted her to make a scene so he could have security throw her out. He wanted to prove to his audience that she was, and always had been, the dead weight. Iris took a slow breath. She closed her eyes for a single second. She pictured the kitchen in palms. She pictured the formality papers. She pictured the look on his face when he'd told her she was just here. She opened her eyes. The anger was gone, replaced by something far colder. A diamond-hard resolve. That's a lovely necklace, Tinsley, Iris said, her voice completely calm. Tinsley and Gideon both blinked, thrown by the non sequitur. Thank you, Tinsley said, her hand flying to the ruby. It's the Matisse ruby. Gideon got it for me from an auction in Geneva. It's practically priceless. Priceless, Iris repeated, nodding slowly. I see. She looked at Gideon. You always did have a taste for things that looked expensive, Gideon, even when you were paying for them with other people's money. Gideon's face flushed. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're out of your league. You're a minnow, Iris. And this is the ocean. Maybe, Iris said. Or maybe you're just a shark who's been swimming in a kiddie pool for so long you've forgotten what a real predator looks like. Is that a threat? Gideon scoffed. From you. You're going to... What? Write a bad Yelp review about my company? No, Iris said, a small, tiny smile playing on her lips. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm just here for work. She turned to walk away, but Gideon, enraged that she was getting the last word, that she hadn't broken, grabbed her arm. Not hard, but firmly, a proprietary, controlling gesture he had used 100 times before. We're not done here, he growled. Get your hand off me, Gideon, Iris said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. Or what? You'll call security? No, a new voice said. A voice that was deep, powerful, and carried the effortless authority of generations of wealth. She'll have me do it. Gideon, Iris, and Tinsley all turned. Just then, the orchestra stopped, the lights in the ballroom dimmed, and a single bright spotlight hit the stage at the far end of the room. Lawrence Blevins, the CEO of Blevins Tech, stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, innovators, welcome to the Apex Gala. Gideon, flustered, let go of Iris's arm as if it were burning. The moment was broken. But as he turned toward the stage, preening for what he assumed would be his introduction, Iris looked past him to the man who had spoken. He was standing near the stage, perfectly tailored, in his late 60s, with a shock of silver hair and eyes as blue and cold as a glacier. He had watched the entire exchange. He nodded, once, to Iris, a subtle, supportive gesture. Iris nodded back. Gideon, oblivious, was composing his face into one of humble genius, ready for his name to be called. What a night! Lawrence Blevins boomed into the microphone, his voice echoing across the silent, cavernous room. Blevins was a man who looked perpetually stressed, a thin veneer of joviality poorly concealing a core of raw panic. Tonight we celebrate the future, Blevins continued, spreading his arms wide. And the future is innovation, the future is daring, the future is partnership. Gideon straightened his tie. Tinsley squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with reflected glory. This was it. We at Blevins Tech have always prided ourselves on finding the next big thing, Blevins said, his eyes scanning the crowd. And this year, we found a titan, a man whose vision is matched only by his tenacity, a man who is poised to change the world of biotech as we know it. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the man of the hour, the COO of Holt Innovations, Mr. Gideon Holt. A wave of thunderous applause broke out. Gideon, his face a mask of practiced humility, raised a hand to the crowd. He kissed Tinsley, a public, performative kiss, and began his short walk toward the stage. He even shot a smug, triumphant smirk back over his shoulder at Iris. See? I'm the king. You're nothing. Iris just watched him go, her expression unreadable. Gideon bounded up the 2 steps to the stage and shook Blevins' hand, pulling him into a one-armed bro hug. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Gideon said, taking the microphone. I'm truly humbled. He wasn't. He launched into a 5-minute speech he had clearly memorized, full of buzzwords like synergy, disruption, and paradigm shift. He talked about his vision, his hard work, his sleepless nights. He never once mentioned a partner, a team, or a wife who'd sold her mother's car to keep his lights on. Iris watched, not with anger, but with a strange, clinical detachment. He was exactly who he had always been. The only difference was that now, everyone else could see it too. And so, Gideon concluded, I accept this partnership with Blevins Tech not as an ending, but as a beginning, the beginning of a new era. Thank you. More applause. Gideon soaked it in, raising his hands like a conquering hero. He handed the mic back to Blevins and remained on stage, basking in the spotlight. Thank you, Gideon. Thank you, Blevins said, clapping him on the back. "A true visionary, a true friend." Gideon beamed. "But," Blevins continued, and the energy in the room shifted. As Gideon himself said, he's the next big thing. But even the next big thing stands on the shoulders of giants, and tonight we are honored, truly, truly humbled, to have the giant in the room with us. Gideon's smile faltered. He hadn't been expecting a follow-up act. We at Blevins Tech, and indeed, Gideon's company, Holt Innovations, have been the recipients of let's call it a guiding hand, a force in the world of global industry so powerful, yet so quiet, that most of us are unaware of its influence. This man, this benefactor, believes in the future of innovation. Blevins was sweating now, reading nervously from his note card. He requested no fanfare, but I simply cannot let the night pass without acknowledging the true architect of this new partnership, the man whose quiet, majority-stake acquisition of Blevins Tech just last month made this all possible. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the chairman and CEO of Pendleton Global, Mr. Arthur Pendleton. The applause was hesitant at first, then deafening as the name sunk in. Pendleton Global. Gideon's blood ran cold. Pendleton Global wasn't a guiding hand. It was the Iron Fist, a multi-trillion-dollar conglomerate that dealt in shipping, logistics, biotech, and, as rumor had it, the quiet purchasing and dismantling of entire nations. They were a myth, an urban legend. Gideon had never heard of a man named Arthur Pendleton. He'd always assumed Pendleton was just a name on a building. The crowd parted. The man Iris had seen earlier, the older, silver-haired man with the glacial blue eyes, walked toward the stage. He moved with a quiet, unhurried grace, his bespoke suit fitting him like a second skin. He didn't bound up the steps, he ascended them as if they were his by right. He shook Blevins' hand, a quick, dismissive gesture, and then stood next to Gideon. The contrast was brutal. Gideon, who had looked so imposing moments before, suddenly looked like a cheap imitation, a boy in his father's suit. Arthur Pendleton took the microphone. He didn't tap it. He didn't adjust it. He simply spoke. "Thank you, Mr. Blevins. That was more than I asked for." His voice was a low, cultivated baritone, a transatlantic accent that could have been from nowhere and everywhere. Blevins Tech is a fine company. Holt Innovations shows promise. He held the promise for a beat, letting it hang in the air, making it sound more like an accusation than a compliment. Pendleton Global believes in the future. We are investing heavily in this sector. We trust Mr. Blevins will continue to manage his division with the same diligence he has always shown. It was a clear, unmistakable message. You work for me? Blevins' face went pale, but he nodded, his fake smile plastered on. Thank you for your hospitality. Arthur finished. He hadn't spoken for more than 30 seconds. He handed the microphone back to a trembling Blevins. The spotlight was still on the three of them. Gideon, desperate to re-establish his dominance, stuck out his hand. Mr. Pendleton, sir. Gideon Holt. It is an unbelievable honor. I had no idea. I am so looking forward to working with you. Our vision. Arthur Pendleton looked at Gideon's outstretched hand for a long, cold second. He did not take it. Instead, he looked past Gideon, past the Klieg lights, into the darkness of the crowd. His icy blue eyes scanned the room, searching. He found what he was looking for. He stepped past Gideon, ignoring him completely. He walked to the edge of the stage, his gaze locked on one person. Iris. He descended the steps, landing silently on the marble. The The crowd, sensing the climax of a drama they didn't understand, parted for him. He walked, not to Blevins, not to his new executive team, but straight through the heart of the party. Gideon and Tinsley watched, frozen in a tableau of confusion and dawning horror. Arthur Pendleton stopped directly in front of Iris Shaw. The silence in the 8,000-square-foot ballroom was absolute. You could hear the clink of an ice cube in a glass 100 feet away. He looked at her, his stern, imposing face breaking into a smile of such genuine, breathtaking warmth that it transformed him. "You're late," he said, his voice just for her. But in the silence, it carried. Iris smiled back, a real, radiant smile. "The traffic was terrible," she said. He reached out and gently brushed a stray wisp of hair from her cheek. "You look beautiful, my dear. Your mother would have been so proud." He held out his arm. Iris took it. And then Arthur Pendleton, the most powerful man in the room, kissed her on the forehead. "Hello, Dad," Iris said. Gideon's jaw dropped. The champagne flute he had just reclaimed from a passing tray slipped from his numb fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Tinsley's perfectly painted mouth formed a silent, ugly "Oh." "Dad?" Gideon croaked, the word a dry rattle in his throat. Arthur Pendleton's warm smile vanished, replaced by the glacial mask. He turned, his arm linked protectively with Iris's, and fixed Gideon Holt with a look of pure, unadulterated loathing. "Mr. Holt," Arthur said, his voice lethally soft, "I've heard so much about you. From my daughter. Iris, Pendleton, Shaw." The shatter of Gideon's glass was the only sound in the world. It was a gunshot, a starting pistol, an executioner's bell. Every eye in the room was on them. Gideon, Tinsley, Iris, and the titan of industry who had just called her daughter. Gideon's brain was a screaming white void. Pendleton, Iris Pendleton, Iris Pendleton. Shaw. Shaw was her mother's name, the librarian. He had checked. He had. But I don't understand, Gideon stammered, a pathetic, wheezing sound. "Iris, your last name. My name is Iris Shaw," Iris said, her voice ringing with a new, reinforced clarity. She was no longer a ghost. She was a pillar. "I took my mother's name when I left you. I always preferred it. I never saw the need to use my father's. I wanted to build something on my own. Without this," she gestured vaguely at the opulence, the power, the man standing next to her. And she did. Arthur Pendleton's voice cut in, sharp as a diamond. He stepped slightly in front of Iris, a subtle, protective gesture. "She built a life. She built a career. She built an algorithm that, I must say, is the only truly valuable piece of intellectual property Blevins Tech has acquired this quarter." Lawrence Blevins, who had scurried off the stage, now reappeared, his face the color of old oatmeal. "Mr. Pendleton, sir, and Ms. Shaw, a pleasure, a wonderful surprise. We are thrilled to have you here." Arthur ignored him. His focus was entirely, predatorily, on Gideon. "Mr. Holt," Arthur said, "I am a man who believes in data. I like to know the variables in my investments. So when my daughter's company, Pendleton Global Solutions, a small R&D division I set up for her, which she has, I'm proud to say, made profitable in 2 years, was folded into the Blevins deal, I looked into all of Blevins' new partners." He took a step closer. Gideon, involuntarily, took a step back. "You," Arthur said, "were a fascinating variable." Gideon was sweating, his expensive tuxedo suddenly hot and tight. "Sir, I can explain. Iris and I, it was a long time ago. We were young. These things." "Were you young?" When you took her mother's $40,000 inheritance? Arthur asked. The crowd gasped. Tinsley's head whipped toward Gideon. An inheritance, Arthur continued, his voice a relentless, prosecuting hammer, that she had explicitly earmarked for a home. Were you young when you convinced her to invest it in your vision? It was an investment, Gideon pleaded, his voice cracking. I paid it back. Oh, you did, Arthur agreed, a horrifyingly pleasant smile on his face. I saw the books. My forensic accountants are very thorough. You paid it back to yourself. You filed it as a personal loan from yourself to the company, then used company funds, her money, to reimburse yourself. Tax-free. It was quite clever. And as my legal team has confirmed, highly illegal. It's called fraud, Mr. Holt. Specifically, fraud by deception and spousal asset misappropriation. Gideon's world was tilting. No, the divorce, the settlement, it's all settled. You mean the prenuptial agreement? Arthur raised an eyebrow. The one you had her sign while telling her it was just a formality. The one that disqualified her from her 5% equity because she failed to provide a supportive home environment. My lawyers loved that part. They, in fact, have a counterfile. It's 300 pages long, and it details, with bank statements and server logs, that Iris Shaw, or Pendleton, as she was then, was not only your supportive environment, she was your co-founder, your lead coder, and your chief strategist. You didn't cut the anchor, Mr. Holt. You were the anchor. She was the one sailing the ship. Gideon couldn't breathe. He looked at Iris, his eyes wide with a new, terrified respect. This wasn't the quaint gnome. This was an executioner. Iris, why? He whispered. Why are you doing this? Iris, who had been silent, finally stepped forward. Her father's presence was her armor, but the words were her own. Why? She repeated, her voice shaking, not with fear, but with a terrible, righteous anger. You stood on that stage, Gideon. You stood there tonight, in front of the world, and you called me dead weight. You mocked me. You laughed about my mother's money. She stepped closer, forcing him to look at her. You didn't just divorce me, Gideon. You tried to erase me. You tried to convince me, and the world, that I was nothing. You built your entire kingdom on my bones. You thought I was gone. You thought I was working in a diner. I did work in a diner, Iris said, her voice ringing out. For a year. I saved my tips, Gideon. I saved every single one, and I rebuilt my life. My life. Not my father's. Mine. I am here tonight, not as Arthur Pendleton's daughter. I am here as the senior project manager for a PGS initiative I created. I am here because I am better than you. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute. Gideon was broken. He was a shell. He had been so thoroughly, surgically dismantled that there was nothing left to say. But the execution wasn't over. Tinsley Rourke, who had been watching this all unfold, wasn't stupid. She was a creature of pure survival, and she saw her diamond-encrusted life raft sinking. She took a step away from Gideon. "Giddy," she said, her voice trembling. Is that true? Did you lie to me?" Gideon looked at her, desperate for an ally. "Tinsley, baby, this is a misunderstanding." But Tinsley's gaze had shifted. It had slid from Gideon's ruined face to Arthur Pendleton's impassive one. She saw the true power in the room. "Oh, Mr. Pendleton," she gushed, suddenly detaching her arm from Gideon's as if he were diseased. This is just awful. I had no idea. Gideon told me. He said she was... Oh, this is just terrible. I feel so used." She was switching horses midstream. It was a valiant, if disgusting, effort. Arthur Pendleton, however, was not amused. He looked at Tinsley. His eyes dropped, just for a second, to the massive, gaudy ruby at her throat. "Miss Rourke," he said, his voice flat. "Yes. Yes, sir," she said, perking up, her smile bright and desperate. "That's a lovely necklace." Tinsley beamed. "Oh, thank you. It's the Matisse ruby from Geneva. Well, Gideon said it's priceless." "It is," Arthur agreed. "The real one, that is. It's currently on loan from my private vault to the Met. It's a remarkable stone, famous for its pigeon blood colour, and for the small, carbon fleck inclusion just to the left of the primary facet. A beautiful imperfection." He paused. Tinsley's smile was frozen. Arthur continued. "Yours is perfect, flawless, not a single inclusion, a truly remarkable fake. It's a very high-quality cubic zirconia, I'm sure, but it's not the Matisse ruby." The colour drained from Tinsley's face. She didn't look at Arthur. She didn't look at the crowd. She turned, her entire body vibrating with a fury that eclipsed all reason, and stared at Gideon. "Fake!" she shrieked, her voice cracking, echoing through the 80th floor. You lying bastard! You told me it was real! You bought me a fake ruby?" Gideon, who had been metaphorically executed, was now facing a literal assault. Treating up with perfectly manicured, claw-like nails, Tinsley Rourke tore the necklace from her own throat. The clasp snapped. Heavy glass, rubies, and diamonds sprayed across the marble floor, skittering like cheap gravel. "You are nothing!" she screamed at him, her face a mask of makeup-streaked rage. "A broke, lying anchor." And with that, she turned and stormed away, pushing through the stunned crowd, her crimson dress whipping behind her. Gideon Holt was left alone. Utterly, completely, and spectacularly alone. He stood in the wreckage of his life, surrounded by whispers, fake jewels, and the shattered pieces of a champagne flute. The high, shrieking echo of Tinsley's rage seemed to suck all the air out of the 80th floor ballroom. The clack-clack-clack of her retreating heels on the marble was a countdown to the end. And then, silence. A vacuum. It lasted for 3, 4, 5 seconds. Then the whispers started. It was not a murmur. It was the sound of 100 small, sharp knives being drawn. It was the sound of reputations being carved up, of fortunes shifting, of social execution. It was the sound of vultures realizing the lion was dead. Gideon Holt stood alone in a circle of ruin. The metaphorical spotlight that had been his anointing was now a harsh, unforgiving interrogation lamp. He was physically present, but he was already a ghost. His face, which had been flushed with rage, was now a waxy putty grey. A single bead of sweat traced a path from his temple, carving a line through his panic-dampened skin. His eyes were not on Iris. They were not on the crowd. They were on the floor, fixed on a large, glittering piece of red-tinted glass, the Matisse ruby. A fake. It had all been fake. His company, his lover, his status, all of it. A high-quality cubic zirconia, and the man who knew the difference was now standing 10 feet away, holding the arm of the woman he had tried to destroy. He was a king, and he had just realized his entire kingdom was made of cardboard. Iris watched him. The terrible coiled serpent of anger that had lived in her stomach for 5 years, the one that had thrashed to life when he grabbed her arm, was finally still. It hadn't been vanquished in a blaze of glory. It had simply uncoiled, sighed, and dissolved. She felt no triumph. She felt no giddy, vindictive joy. She felt nothing. Just the vast, quiet, profound emptiness of a great weight being set down. The debt was paid, the books were balanced. She was finally free. Her father, Arthur Pendleton, felt the shift in her. The tension left her shoulders. He put his arm around her, a solid, grounding weight. "Let's go home, Iris," he said, his voice a low rumble, meant only for her. "I believe your work here is done." He was right. It was over. She had done what she came to do, and so much more. She nodded, ready to turn, ready to walk away from this room, this city, this entire chapter of her life. But as she took her first step, her gaze snagged on something. A face in the crowd. Not a sycophant. Not a rival. It was a young woman, perhaps in her mid-20s, standing alone near a wilting floral arrangement. She was in a simple black dress, holding a tablet to her chest like a shield. Her eyes were wide, and she was staring at Iris, not with pity or morbid curiosity, but with a look of pure, unadulterated awe. Iris knew that woman. Not her name, but her. An hour ago, before Gideon's speech, Iris had seen her. The young woman had been trying to show her tablet to a dismissive Lawrence Blevins, while Gideon and his cronies looked on, smirking. "Predictive behavioral modeling?" Gideon had said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sweetheart, that's adorable. Why don't you go get us all some more champagne? That's a predictive behavior I can get behind." The young woman had flushed crimson and shrunk away. Gideon had made a career of crushing people. He'd done it to that woman. He had done it, most brutally, to Iris. And in that moment, Iris realized her work wasn't quite done. The destruction was finished. But the point of it all was just beginning. "Wait," Iris said. Arthur stopped, looking at her with a questioning eyebrow. Iris stepped away from her father's protective embrace. She was no longer a victim being shielded. She was a power, moving on her own. She did not look at Gideon. She did not acknowledge his presence. She simply walked past him, as if he were a statue, a piece of furniture, an irrelevant obstacle. The crowd, sensing a new, final act, went silent again. Gideon, hollowed out, saw her move. He looked up, his eyes empty, and watched her approach the young woman in the black dress. He didn't understand. Iris stopped in front of the woman, who looked for a moment like she might faint. Your work," Iris said, her voice clear and kind, yet ringing with an authority that was new to her, but fit perfectly. "The predictive behavioral modeling. I saw your abstract when my team was doing due diligence on Blevins R&D. You did?" the young woman stammered, her knuckles white on her tablet. "Yes. Your code for saturated networks. It was more than adorable. It was elegant." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. He said, I know what he said," Iris said, and for the first time, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. It was a smile of alliance. Men like him, small men, are terrified of elegant code. They'd rather it serve drinks than show them up. She reached into the small, sapphire blue clutch she carried. She pulled out a simple, thick-cut cream business card. Iris Shaw, Senior Project Manager, Head of Ethical Logistics, Pendleton Global Solutions. She held it out. The young woman took it as if it were a holy relic. "My division is hiring," Iris said. "We're not looking for visionaries. We're looking for architects, people who want to build something real, something that works." She tapped the woman's tablet. "Email me on Monday. We'll have lunch." I will," the woman whispered, a look of fierce, dawning hope on her face. "Thank you, Mrs. Shaw." "Thank you. We'll see," Iris said, with a kind nod. "Now, go get a real drink. You've earned it." She turned. And now, finally, she had to walk past Gideon to get to her father. He was still there, frozen, having watched the entire exchange. He had watched her, in his moment of ultimate defeat, poach the talent he had been too arrogant to even see. He had watched her build, effortlessly, in the smoking ruins of his life. He finally understood. This wasn't just revenge, this was a replacement. She stopped, just for a moment, directly in front of him. He flinched. His eyes, no longer hollow, were now pleading. Why, Iris? Why all this? She gave him his answer. Her voice was not angry. It was not sad. It was the cool, calm, dispassionate voice of an auditor delivering a final, damning report. You were right about one thing, Gideon, she said, her voice so quiet he had to lean in, desperate for the words. You said I was a boat anchor. You were right, I was. For years I was the only thing holding you up. She looked at the shattered glass on the floor, the fake gems, the room full of new enemies. I was the anchor, keeping your ship from showing the world what it truly was. From sinking under the weight of your own arrogance, and now... She held his gaze, and in her eyes he saw not a trace of the woman he'd known. He saw only a vast, cold, empty ocean. You're not a king, you're not a titan, you're just a bad investment. She didn't wait for a reply. There was nothing left to say. She turned her back on him. She walked the last 10 feet to her father, who was watching her with a look of profound, immeasurable pride. She took his arm. Together, the daughter who had been erased and the father who had moved the world to find her, walked away. They did not look back. The crowd, a sea of stunned, respectful faces, parted for them. They walked through the ballroom, out of the spotlight, and toward the elevators, their steps silent, their departure absolute. Gideon Holt was left alone on the 80th floor. The music, a thin, reedy string quartet, tried to restart, but it sounded like a funeral dirge. His contract would be voided by 9 a.m., his accounts frozen by noon. The name Holt Innovations would be a punchline by evening. The king was dead, and the quaint little garden gnome had just inherited the kingdom, and just like that, the empire built on lies came crashing down. Gideon learned the hard way that the people you step on your way up are the same ones you meet on your way down, especially when one of them owns the building. Iris didn't just get her revenge, she got her life back, proving that the best comeback is building an empire of your own, on your own terms. What did you think of Iris's ultimate move? Was Gideon's downfall an even 10-10-10? Or was Tinsley screaming about the fake necklace the most satisfying part? Let me know your favorite moment of karmic justice down in the comments. And if you love stories where the dead weight turns out to be the one holding all the power, then you know what to do. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to see a bully get what's coming to them, and subscribe to the channel. We post new dramatic stories every single week, and you won't want to miss what happens next.